Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we're going to be starting our positional rankings with the offensive tackle group. I've got 10 prospects we're going to talk about. There are some exceptions off of this list. And I want to note that right off the bat so you guys understand if you don't see a name in here. There are certain prospects I did not include in this group that I have as interior offensive linemen, and these are players that did play at tackle this last year, but they're ones that I think would be much better off on the interior. The first one of those is Talise Fuaga. Now, do I think Talise Fuaga can be a really good tackle? Yes, I do. I think he can be good. But I think the ceiling is so much higher for him as a guard just because all the issues I see with his game solely have to do with the tackle position, right? Like, he struggles to kick out that well. I think that's probably the biggest gripe I have. Sometimes speed rushers can get around the edge. You aren't going to deal with that nearly as much on the interior. So, Talise Fuaga is an example of one. There's also Jordan Morgan, who I saw the same issues with, but probably even larger for him. He's not a super high prospect for me, but he'll be another one that does not make this list for that reason. So just want to get that out of the way first. But we're going to go through 10 prospects here. We're going to go from 10 to 1. I'll show you my overall ranking for where they fall currently. I'll show you some information on the players' measurements. This is all from my NFL Draft Big Board. You guys can access that from the description. You can access that off of my Twitter as well. Get all this information for free. It's at no charge this year. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to hop right into this. We're going to talk about our first guy, the 10th overall prospect for me at the tackle position. And that's Christian Jones. Now, Christian Jones was one that I didn't really hear about until late in the process. It was close to the Senior Bowl, where he just kind of came out of nowhere. Like, really, I had not heard a single thing about it. But Christian Jones has been a long-term starter for the Texas Longhorns. I think he's started 4 years for them. He's 24 years old at the time of the draft. So he's up there in age compared to a lot of prospects, but this is someone who's been very steady, who's been very reliable, and you know what you're going to get. That's the biggest thing with Christian Jones. As far as his measurements, I think they come out great. I think the only thing is maybe like weight, if I was going to try to go after anything. He comes in a little over 6'5", 305 pounds, really big hands. Everything is color coded as well as far as those measurements, some of the athletic testing compared to the air tackles. So very bright green is going to mean that he was best in the class, and then very bright red is going to mean worst in the class. And so you see with Christian Jones that he's really good in all these metrics. Big hands, long arms, nearly a 7-foot wingspan. He moves fast. And, you know, the RAS score might not be that great, and that's relative athletic score, so you know, but not something I'm super worried about. You can watch some film on him as well. I'll have these showing for each prospect, but to kind of get into his game and what I know about Christian Jones, like I said, really solid overall build for him. He has really long arms, a lot of starting experience, and this is a guy who goes out, he's searching for work. He's not going to stand there idly like a Luke Fortner as the quarterback gets hit, right? Obviously different positions on the offensive line, but you know, that's something that Jacksonville could use. You know, these players that want to maul you, they want to get after you. And so I really like that about Christian Jones. He gets on the move really well, has great speed, good strength, and I feel like he does a good job with leverage a lot of the time as well, standing up defenders. Now, as far as my issues with him, I find him sometimes overset a bit too much, so he's usually like, he'll end up preparing for someone to come around the edge. He allows them to go inside, and so it's an even quicker lane to the quarterback, which is really the worst case scenario you can have. You'd rather get beat around the edge with speed, ideally, right? Out of those two options. There's also concerns about lateral movement, how fast he can kick out. Now, if he's running, he's fine, but it's just that foot speed, right? And then finally, sometimes he can lunge at defenders, ducks his head. When you do that, it's hard to know what's coming at you if the defender pulls a move last second. So that's something he's got to get out of his game because he could really struggle in the NFL with that. But overall, you know, I think with Christian Jones, like, he's one of the simplest evaluations to me in this class because what you see is what you get, right? He's an experienced starter. He's got a good combination of physical traits. And he needs a little bit of tweaking. I don't know if he's going to be one of the best tackles in the league, right? But this would be a fantastic player to bring in this year. Have him start at right tackle, try to earn that job. Worst case scenario, you got yourself in there Walker Little that you're picking maybe, third round. Now, as far as where I have him ranked, I have him a lot higher. Like, I would be comfortable taking him at the end of the second round. But, Christian Jones, very much like what I see with them. One of my favorite prospects to draft. If you ever follow what I put out, mock drafts, all that stuff. Now the next guy, Patrick Paul, coming out of Houston. Patrick Paul has ridiculous size. That's one of the huge things about him. He's 22 and a half years old, 6'7.5", 331 pounds. And he didn't look like this at first. I thought he was maybe 315, 320. Ends up being incorrect. He's a much larger guy. Now, as far as his game, and you'll kind of have to hear this early before I get deep into the evaluations, but the hand size goes along with another issue for me. And this is what makes him 9th overall. Because you think, if he's a good pass protector, which you'll hear from me about Patrick Paul, he's probably going to be pretty high on the list. But he struggles as a run blocker. And when you have the combination of small hands and bad run blocking grades, usually you're not fixing that. Because you can't control where the defender's going to go. You can't control what their lane is. You have very little that you can dictate over them in the run game. So that's my major concern, but really crazy arm length and wingspan, well over 7 feet. It's crazy numbers. Good 40-yard dash as well, and a hell of a relative athletic score. Now, getting some film on him here. Like I said with Patrick Paul, he is a guy that is a very good pass blocker, right? But there's concerns about the run block. That's where he's not been as strong throughout his career. He's had a lot of years of experience to fix that. It just hasn't happened at this point. But there's still a lot to work with, especially for teams that like to throw the ball a lot. Now, Jacksonville, quite frankly, you could put into that mix. You could say Patrick Paul would be a hell of a fit if they just want to find a new left tackle. They want to keep Anton on the right side, right? Because this is a pass-first offense. Run later, right? When you're up big in a game, you want to try to click down the clock, and that's when you start running the ball. That's Doug Pearson's philosophy. So Patrick Paul would probably fit that really well. Of course, I've talked about before, I want to get balanced players. And that's where the team fits high. He's not super high on my board, though, personally. But, talking about the things that are really good about him, though, that we haven't hit on. Those pass blocking grades, they're elite. They're some of the best you'll see. And he anchors really well. He handles defenders very easily in pass protection. He's going to be a really nice first-day addition to an NFL offense. And throughout these 5 years, while I said he hasn't improved necessarily as a run blocker, he has gotten better as a pass blocker every year, and he's one of the better ones coming out of this class. However, for issues, he has a history of penalties. It has considerably decreased recently, but still something I would monitor. He's also got some issues with the step back. He can get a little sloppy with his footwork. He needs to anticipate moves a little bit better. Reaction time can be an issue. And then finally, he can struggle to keep engaged with defenders. This is partially due to poor hand placement, but that also comes back to the hand size. You got to be so fine with where you hit a defender if you don't have big hands. And the opposite example of this we'll talk about when we do interior offensive line is Zach Frazier. Because Frazier's got these, stupid big hands, and he will tell people where to go. You'll see that on film when we go through that. So, Patrick Paul, very much the opposite. But this still is a very prototypical left tackle, someone who's going to perform very well for an NFL team early in their career as a pass blocker. You just got to live with what the run blocking is, because I don't think it's going to get much better. So, that's kind of where I see him. I think he'd be a fine pick on day 2, even early on day 2. Depends on the kind of offense you're running. He wouldn't make sense for Jacksonville. I would just prefer if the Jaguars went out and tried to get someone who was a little more balanced in their game. A number 8 overall, 33rd overall prospect, Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. So talking about Guyton here. He's 22 years old, does not have a lot of experience, but he's got some great traits, which is why that you heard very early on, Balky's a fan of him. He's watching him close to the Senior Bowl. You hear a lot of teams like this guy. And I would not be shocked if he's going somewhere in the mid 20s on draft night. But he is a very raw prospect. As far as measurables and athletic testing, he's about 6'5", just under that. Sorry, actually, I got the wrong number here. 6'8". It's a big difference there. I was looking at Kingsley Sua, who we'll talk about next. 322 pounds, really good size, like the 320s for offensive tackles, especially for this scheme. He's got over 10-inch hands. He's got a 34-inch arm length, and he's got nearly a 7-foot wingspan. But as far as like speed, didn't test out the greatest in the 4-yard dash, but he was still pretty explosive. You can see that through the 10-yard split. So it's more so the long speed. You're not really going to worry about that as much because it's not like this guy is going to be running down the field all the time, right? We'll see that once in a while, maybe, like he did with like Ezra Cleveland when he came here, but not going to happen a whole ton. So Tyler Guyton, measurables are the big thing for him. And if you watch film, I don't know if there's like huge issues in this, but you can see it. Like there's refinement that he needs to have in his game. He has not played a lot of football, but he's got a ton to work with. Like we said, great frame, physical attributes. He's a quick mover for a lineman. He gets to the second level really well. It's just lining up blocks can be an issue. As you saw on the first play, he does pull very well, though. And I really like that because Jacksonville does that a lot with offensive linemen. They want to get you on the move. However, there is a large amount of issues with Tyler Guyton's game. So, talk about protection. It's very shaky in that regard. He is not a guy that I would trust right out of the gates to be a good pass protector or really even that great of a run blocker necessarily. I think he needs a lot of improvement. There's just a lot to work with, right? Hand placement needs to improve. Leverage needs to improve. He was getting a lot of coaching at the Senior Bowl for a reason. For his size, I don't feel like he always plays with the strength I want to see, but some of that could just, ultimately come down to how is he lining up blocks, how is he engaging with defenders. That helps a lot. And he struggles ultimately to hold on the blocks when he does get them lined up. So, do I want this guy starting day one? I personally don't. I think an NFL team will have him start. I think someone's going to throw him into the fire. I think they're probably going to regret it. But Tyler Guyton, if you can coach him up and you take the time with him, I think he could be one of the best tackles in this class. It's just where we've heard him talked about. Do you want to take him at 17? Do you want to trade down the first round? I don't think so. Because there's better options for me. I don't have to go take the risk, right? Because this is a very high risk, high reward pick ultimately. Now, our next guy, our 7th overall tackle, Kingsley Sua. He's just over 21 years old. This is a 6'5" measurement that I said earlier by accident. 326 pounds, though. He is a great combination of movement skills and strength. One of the best that you see in this class. And that's why I have him as a first-round prospect, because there's so much to work with, and you see some of that progress in his game. You gotta watch it live at the Senior Bowl. But huge hands. Some of the biggest in this class from the position. Zach Frazier is, I think, the only person that beats him out from what I see right now. Might be wrong on that, but he's pretty close. Like over 10.5-inch hands, good arm length, and a solid wingspan overall. Moves super fast, one of the fastest 40-yard dash times. Same for the split. High relative athletic score. But Kingsley Sua is still a guy that needs refinement. I just don't think it's to the level of like what Tyler Guyton was. And that's why I have him above Tyler Guyton. Because I think you're working with a lot of the same things. Maybe not the height so much, right? But you have a lot of the same intangibles. But you've got more progress. You got more snaps there. Someone who's played more football. He's a super strong, physical player. He is a mauler in the way he plays. He moves incredibly well. He will put defenders into the ground. He's not scared of that. He's going to be effective as a run blocker on the move, which is a huge requirement for Jacksonville, like we said. Sorry for slurring my words here. And I feel like a lot of his issues that we'll talk about here are fixable. There's not many things I'm looking at that are like, well, you can't fix that. You can't do anything about that. Like, sure, maybe he could have a slightly bigger wingspan, or he could have more height. But these are things you can survive with. You know, Anton Harrison, 6'4". He's still a really good tackle. Like, it's okay. So I'm fine with those things. But as far as the other concerns, I don't feel like he has consistent quick feed in pass pro. He shows the upside, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. His with his size, it doesn't always show up on film either. Like sometimes defenders will move him, they'll force him off balance. It's the way they plays with his hands, how he engages with people. That is an issue. I want to see him improve in his leverage. But ultimately, it's just refinement. These are the things that are going to come with time. This is a really good candidate to bring in for a year, to have sit, and then to have start after that. Like, if we picked Kingsley Sua, what I would want to do with him is I want to have him be the swing tackle to start, because he can play left tackle and right tackle. I think he's best on the right. Have Walker Little start for a year. You probably move on from Cam because you don't need to spend the money there if you got another tackle already waiting in the works. But have Kingsley sit for a season behind Walker Little. Get to learn at that position. Get coached up by Phil Rauscher. In year 2, let him loose. I think it's worth it. But as far as where we draft him, it's going to be second round if he falls to us. And I just don't know if that happens ultimately. So, very much like Kingsley Sua, but there is going to be a jump in our next tier. So my next guy, one of the better players in this class, Troy Fashanu. It's kind of hard for me to put him ultimately at what would be 6th overall on this list, but there's so many really good names just above him. And so it's debatable, but we got a lot of prospects that are going to be ranked very closely, you'll see. There's a lot of them that are within like 10 spots of each other. But for Fashanu, he is an older prospect, a little bit on the shorter size, but he is still someone who just, as far as his tape, the way he plays, that's what's going to win you over with him. Obviously, like, you see some red with the arm length, the wingspan. The arm length is good. The span's not as good. Smaller hands, but runs really well, moves really well. The thing that sticks out with Fashanu that you're going to find on film with him is this guy packs a punch. I mean, if I got grabbed by this guy, I would think I was going to die. You can see it when he engages with him. He looks like he's going to kill someone. And I love it. Like, I would love to have that on my offensive line. But Fashanu, like, talk about positives aside from that. He's used a ton on the move. He's in a system where he gets to pull a lot. He does really well mirroring defenders. You see that through his speed, the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split, super high scores there. He plays with a lot of physicality. And we talked about the way he plays, just slamming into guys who are rushing him. I mean, he plays with heavy hands. He has a great center of gravity, good leverage, and it's partially helped by his size, right? He's a little bit of a smaller guy. He's not, one of these Patrick Pauls, like super tall. But I like a lot of things about him. He does really well getting to the second level, doing damage in the run game. Now, as far as concerns, I've got a few with him. I think that you could argue that he should be a guard in the NFL. I do leave him at tackle, though, because I think he could be just as good at either of them. So I give him benefit of the doubt and give him a chance where he's played throughout his career. Sometimes he can have issues picking up defenders. This is just sort of like your second assignment sort of stuff, or maybe you don't have anyone you immediately have engage into you. Just looking for more work, that can be an issue at times that I've seen on film. And then he has a very aggressive mentality that you love, but it can lead to him sometimes losing his balance once in a while, and then he can have some quick losses on film. So those are some concerns that I have with him. But ultimately, I think he's a super exciting prospect. I think he's just going to be a damn good fit in the NFL for a team that needs basically any starter, heck, anywhere on the offensive line. I don't know why you couldn't even play him at center, honestly. He doesn't have experience there, but wherever you need it, like, I think Fashanu can come in, train there, and do a hell of a job. Now, our next guy, someone who has basically played everywhere. Just a little bit of an improved version of Troy Fashanu. That's Graham Barton, my number 24 overall prospect, 5th offensive lineman. I ultimately decided to put him in tackle. I think he will play on the inside, but watching the film back, I don't see any reason why he can't play tackle. This guy is really refined, plays the game great, and he makes up for some measurables that they don't look the greatest, right? That's why we talk about interior a little bit more for him, because you want to try to get to maybe that 33-inch arm length. You want to try to have a bigger wingspan than he has. He doesn't have huge hands, but he makes up for all these things in the way he plays. And so I think he can survive outside, but ultimately, he would prefer he went to the interior. Now, as far as positives and negatives about him on film, and we'll get into the video here. Graham Barden has a great frame. He's a quick mover. What he does in the run game is great. He will be an impact player for whatever team drafts him. He's an elite pole blocker, one of the best I've seen this year. He's always searching for work, and he has a mauler mentality. He wants to kill people on every play. He wants to end your career. You will find him. If you have him on your team, you're watching him, you will find him consistently putting defenders to the ground. It's 110% effort all the time. I love a lot of things about him. He's got great strength. Concerns are really minor for me. It's more so to do with maybe the arm length and all that. That's really about it for me with what he does. Now, getting into the air concerns. He can be susceptible to some inside moves when he's protecting the edge. So that's maybe another problem with him playing tackle that I would like to see improve, and why he might just be better inside, because you're not worrying about that as much. You got a guy out there, so you're limited to how much real estate the defender has to work with, and why he would be so good if he plays there. But ultimately, still going to be a fine tackle in the NFL if you put him there. He's also got a little bit of a knack for penalties that I've seen, so I'd like to see that improve at the next level. And then finally, with how aggressive a mentality he has, and this is very similar to Fanu, just kind of to the next level, he'll have great plays, right? He will also have plays where he loses very fast, because someone will be prepared when he tries to kill him, and they'll embarrass him. That will happen. The good thing is, I think he has a pretty short-term memory with how he treats that stuff. It's not going to kill him for the rest of the game. He recovers very well from it. So, Graham Barden, he's been one of my favorite prospects throughout this whole process. Someone I've liked the whole time. He was the first player that I mocked to the Jaguars back, I think, when we did our bye-week mock draft after Week 8 last year. So, I've been a fan for a while. Love his game. I won't pick him necessarily at 17, because I think there's too many prospects you could take over him at that point. But I'd be really happy if he came to Jacksonville in some way, shape, or form. Now, getting to our top 4, and these are the elite of the elite names for me. And there might be a couple you disagree with here. I've got Olu Fashanu as my 4th overall prospect. This has changed a lot since early in the process, because early on, to me, he was kind of like the clear number 1 in this class, and then Joe Alt was a little bit behind him. Because we're kind of riding in off the 2022 film. But Fashanu, I feel like this year it wasn't terrible, but he didn't necessarily grow in the ways you wanted to see him grow. But as far as measurables, jump into that first. He's a young prospect, 6'6", 312 pounds, good size there. You'll see the clear issue, though. And this will relate to his ability as a run blocker as well, like we talked about earlier with one of our prospects in Patrick Paul. 8.5-inch hands. They are some of the smallest in this class. And that is a major problem, because when we talk about what Fashanu struggles with right now, because it's not the arm length, it's not the wingspan, it's not the athletic testing, there's no problems there. But his struggle is run blocking. That is my major concern, because you have the really scary combination of having a guy who has very small hands, is not refined in any way, shape, or form as a run blocker right now. Does not grade out well, does not have good film there. That's why he does not make it higher on this list. Because as much as I could maybe even say he's the best pass protector in this class, I want you to be good at run blocking too. You can't be a liability in that regard. So, Jacksonville could still love him. He could still be there and be a good pick for them. I just wouldn't expect anything in the run game. That's the major concern. But this guy, talking about some positives now, though. He's essentially immovable when he anchors. One of the best anchors in this class. He overpowers defensive linemen, pancakes them routinely. He will move in the run game with ease. Like we said, it's the issue of the hands, right? It's harder to place him in the right spot. It's harder to control where defenders are going to go. That's your problem there. He's also very quick off the snap. We're not talking about false penalties, Jawan Taylor, but doing it in the right way, right? Not the way it's going to get you penalized 100 times a game. And ultimately, like, we're just talking about pass blocking. He has an elite ceiling, and he's already pretty dang close to it right now. If that's what you're looking for, this is the best guy in the class. And even for the small hands, I feel like he has really good hand strength. I do want to leave that in there. Want to note that he does do really well with that. But, concerns, we talked about the hands. It's just that and being a better run blocker. And I just don't know how much you can fix all those things. So that's why he comes in at 4th overall for me on the tackles list. But still, really good tackle. He could be first off the board still at this point. It just depends on how teams view like the comparison of pass and run blocking. If they just care about pass blocking, you can try to argue him over a Joe Wall. You can try to make that argument. So I do like Fashanu, but for the Jaguars and how much they need to improve in the run game and they have decent pass protectors, I don't think it's a guy that moves the needle in the ways that I want it to move. So for Jacksonville, the team might like him. I personally wouldn't as much. Now we'll get to 3rd overall. J.C. Latham. I have him now as a top 20 prospect. He slowly inched his way up the board. Latham comes in really young, good overall size, 6'6". He was originally slated, I think, like nearly 360 pounds, but he's at 342 now. Considerably better. Great measurables. 11-inch hands. These are the second biggest in the class. So these are actually bigger than Zach Frazier's. And there's one more guy we'll talk about right after that has even bigger hands than what J.C. Latham does. But this is a great trait that he has. Over 35-inch arm length and a 7-foot wingspan. So I love all those intangibles about him. As far as the actual film with him, he's a very balanced player. I feel like he moves really well. He has great functional strength. He seals the edge in the run game at a high level. And he mirrors people really well. Like a good combination of all these different things that you're going to look for in a tackle. Now, he does have a very lightning quick release that can provide an advantage against rushers, but he gets false start time sometimes. So when I watched it, first thing I thought about, because this was when Jawan Taylor was getting all the penalties this year, I thought, this guy is Jawan Taylor. That's who he is. That would be my comparison for J.C. Latham just because of those things, if I'm being honest. Because Jawan is a really good player outside of the false start issues and all that. Like, he's very consistent. There's a reason why he got paid. But that's such a huge problem for teams because that kills drives. It happens like once a game with him. I think he had 22 penalties this year. Latham is very much the same way. So my concerns, it mainly comes down to penalties. There's some lapses occasionally. But this is a prospect that if he just figures that out, he's a near complete player. Just someone you can put out there. You can trust him right off the bat. And he's going to do a good job for your team. This is a very highly rated prospect for me. I love what he's going to offer to an NFL team. You just got to try to coach the penalties out of him. Because if you get to the point where you're just getting the best out of this guy and you're not worrying about those lows, he could be one of the best prospects in this class. At least number 2. He could be. So, very much like what I see in J.C. Latham outside of the penalties. Gives me Vietnam flashbacks to Jawan Taylor. Thankfully, he got all the penalties in Kansas City. But Marius Mims, my 3rd overall guy. Number 13 overall prospect. And there's kind of an asterisk here. And what I mean by that is that he does not have a ton of snaps. So there is risk involved. There's more risk than what you'd like for a prospect that is 13th overall. But there's just so much to work with. And there's really good film for Marius Mims. So jumping into it, he's 21 years old right now. He's 6'8", roughly 340 pounds. So he's basically matching what Latham has, except he's 2 inches taller. He has even bigger hands, arms, and wingspan. 11 and a quarter inch hands, over 36-inch arms, and over an 86-inch wingspan. Some of the craziest numbers we've ever seen. I'm pretty sure that wingspan beats out Trayvon Walker, by the way. He's fast. Got a great relative athletic score. Maybe not as explosive as what you'd like there, but I think the film shows he's something different. I just really like Marius Mims. And he would be a guy that if Jacksonville picks him up, I'd be happy with it. I could survive with it. I think it's a little riskier than what I'd want, but he could be a hell of an NFL player. And having him on the right side with Anton Harrison would be great, as long as he works out, right? But he wears his weight well. This guy does not look 340 pounds to me when I watch him on film. He moves well. He dominates a lot of pass sets very early. It's just an issue of sustaining those blocks. I think that he could be someone you want to train at left tackle, potentially. I don't think this would happen in Jacksonville, but other teams could consider it. He said that he did train at left tackle during practices, and he was very much capable of playing there. So that was good stuff to hear. More versatility and where he can start for a team. And I have this as a positive because of how much people have thought it's a negative. But he appears to have injury issues. When you look at like how many snaps he played in a game, what games he played, like it's a very limited amount of time. But the way Georgia operated, they had starters that they were loyal to that were out there more than Marius Mims. They swapped guys out, so Mims was only starting like 20 snaps a game really until his final year. And so he didn't get a lot of playtime, not because of injuries, but because of the way Georgia operates their team. In the final year, he did get injured at the end of the season. He went through, it wasn't Tommy John surgery. It was tightrope surgery is what it was. But he's fully recovered from that, I believe, at this point. He'll be ready for next year. I don't think that there's the injury concerns that people talk about with Mims. And that's why I like Mims so much, because if teams are looking at him that way, they don't understand the reasoning for why he's been out for so much time, then you might get a steal on him. He could absolutely be worth the 17th overall pick, and he could be a top 10 prospect at the end of the day. So I really like what he offers. As far as issues, he can lunge a little bit. He has some leverage problems. He's still, despite how well I think he's played for the limited amount of time, he's a very raw prospect at this point. Like we said, very few snaps. 800 snaps over 3 seasons. Does not sound good, but there's reason for it, which is good. And then finally, with him, it's just a question for teams. Like, how often is he going to be on the field? And so I feel comfortable answering that by saying I think he will be on the field a lot. I don't have major concerns there. But you still don't have the proof of him playing consistently for long periods of time. But when I'm watching Mims, and I think about what everyone said about Tyler Guyton earlier this year, I quite frankly just see Mims as the guy in this class that it is what Tyler Guyton's hyped up to be. So I like him. I'd be fine with him in Jacksonville. He is ultimately, I hope I said this right when I originally said it, he's my 2nd overall offensive tackle. He'll be my 3rd overall offensive lineman, behind Talise Fuaga. We'll talk about in the next video when we do our guard rankings, which you can throw him in this if you want. But just so you know where he falls, he is above Marius Mims by a few spots. But getting into the final guy that you know is going to be first, it's first for almost everyone. It's Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, my number 5 overall prospect. Alt has ridiculous height, 6'8" and a half, 321 pounds, 10-inch hands, 34-inch arm length, solid measurables there, right? Not out of this world, right? But just crazy overall frame outside of that. Really good athletic testing. You watch him on film, he is just about as good as it gets with a player. There's just not many concerns here. I do have one that I haven't heard talked about a ton. I do want to note. I will do that at the end. But one of the reasons why Joe Alt is such a good offensive tackle is because he is a former tight end. Used to play the position, helps you move, helps you be familiar with blocking as well. He made the transition. You can see it in the way he plays the game. He does really well diagnosing stunts. You can find that on film as well. He can pass off rushers. He can move in space. He consistently moves players in the run game as well. So he is a very advanced run blocker. That's where he just blows Olu Fashanu out of the water for me. He's got long arms. Helps him with leverage against defenders. He's always looking for work. And over the past 2 seasons combined, he's given up 13 pressures, which is insane. And he's allowed 1 sack. So, great stuff from him. You love what you see. As far as my major concern with him, though, I feel like he gives up a lot of space on his blocks. Like, he will almost buy himself time and he'll get really close to the quarterback. I don't like that as much, but I think that's an easily coachable issue. It's just if that doesn't change, obviously you got a problem there. But you will see him on film get a little too close to the quarterback. He doesn't engage super fast. That's my main issue with him. But outside of that, you got so much to work with. You got a young prospect who's already very good at the game. He's got the tight end experience, which helps him a ton here. I love what I see with him. And he's going to be a hell of a pick for a team. Probably the Tennessee Titans, if I had to guess right now. We'll see. But that's where I think he'll go ultimately in the draft. So probably the one guy on this list that I do not expect to be available for the Jaguars. In fact, I'll just tell you right now, he will not be available for the Jaguars unless they're trading up to 4 or 5 or 6, which I don't expect. But those are our tackles, guys. Let me know your rankings, what you think about all these prospects. There's a lot of good ones. My rankings are subject to change, of course. But whenever we get to April 25th or whatever day it is, when the draft starts, I'm not editing anymore. They're going to stay where they were. We'll see where they all land. But this is where I got right now. A huge fan of Marius Mims. Probably the biggest takeaway from this. Because for a lot of people, he's not top 2. He's maybe like 4 or 5 on a lot of rankings. But I have faith in him as a prospect that he's going to work out the next level. And if he puts things together even more, you got everything you need there to work with. So out of this whole class, like who would I love to land the most that I think is realistic? That's the guy for sure. But let me know what you think for sure. Love to hear it. Love getting all the comments on these videos. I really enjoy it. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Probably will be a couple days till I upload. I'm going to head out of town now. I'll be back Saturday night. So if something happens like breaking news, I'll try to record something, but it'll be difficult for me to put out too much this weekend. So that's just what will be going on. But appreciate you watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And finally, go Jags.